Prospects seem to be no match in 2025. We've had non-stop upsets, lots of prospect killers in 2025. The undefeated records are negative overall this year. There has been more undefeated fighters losing their O than winning their first fight in the UFC, or just winning and keeping that undefeated streak going. So in this video, I'm going to be giving you guys all of my favorite prospect killers in 2025. Before we go ahead and get into it, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and let's start it off with the first prospect killer of Christian Rodriguez. The prospect killer is how he's branding, is all about him being a prospect killer. He's beat 4 or 5 undefeated fighters so far in his career, not all this year. Most recently, he beat Austin Bashi by unanimous decision. He was a 3-1 underdog. He's been almost a 3-1 underdog against every single prospect he's faced. He beat Raul Rosas Jr., who is now getting a shot at the rankings soon. He beat Isaac Dolgarian, who is a very well renowned prospect. Some guys rate Isaac Dolgarian very high, and they think he's got a huge ceiling in the UFC, but he lost by split decision. It was a close fight, but Christian Rodriguez beat Cameron Saman as well. He beat Austin Bashi. He beat Isaac Dolgarian and Raul Rosas Jr. Those are all great wins for Christian Rodriguez, but when it comes to Christian Rodriguez facing the unks of the division, either at featherweight or at bantamweight, he tends to lose. He tends to fall off. I picked him against Andre Fili in his last fight, and he lost by decision because he just can't beat these unks who are not green in the UFC. He beats the green fighters who aren't settled into the UFC yet, who don't know their way around the octagon as well as Christian Rodriguez does. He is a good fighter, but he only beats prospects. He has got to be one of the best prospect killers in the UFC, if not the best prospect killer. And so far this year in 2025, he's beat 1 prospect, and he's faced 2 guys who have been in the UFC for a minute. Melky Costa, who he lost by decision, and then Andre Fili, who he lost by decision, who he somehow lost a split decision to Fili. That should have been a unanimous, but he lost by split. Christian Rodriguez he's got to be the best prospect killer. If there's anyone better, let me know in the comments down below. But we will move on to the next prospect killer. My first prospect killer is Christian Rodriguez. We move on to the next one, who just fraud checked one of my favorite prospects at flyweight, Charles freaking Johnson, man. Skullet energy, with the skullet cut. Oh my goodness, just flatline KO'd Launer Kavanaugh in Shanghai, brutally KO'd him. I picked Kavanaugh. I made that mistake. I should have known better. Charles Johnson is the fraud checking master. He just knows how to beat up these guys who don't have the best cardio, who don't have the most dog in them. Charles Johnson is the dog of the division, the dog of the flyweight division. He's constantly being disrespected by the UFC. He's getting prospects chucked at him left and right. Most well known is going to be Joshua Van. He fought Joshua Van when he was on his streak, and he was just coming up, and people were like, oh, Joshua Van's a good prospect. He's got a high chance to win and get into the rankings. And now Joshua Van has beat everybody since losing to Charles Johnson. He recently beat Brandon Royval. And since losing to Charles Johnson, he's won every single fight. Charles Johnson is the only guy Van has lost to in the UFC. And that win for Charles Johnson has aged amazingly. He's just constantly being disrespected by the UFC matchmaking, and he's getting given prospects like Ramazan Temirov, who was juicing PEDs and who was on steroids and was literally just winging bombs. He just looked like a big ball of just juice. He looked like he was juiced up, and he did get caught for PEDs. That should be a no contest. And then recently, he fights Launer Kavanaugh in Shanghai, and Launer does amazing round 1. Round 2, he starts off hot. He's doing well, and then you can just see Charles Johnson break him in the second round. About 2 or 3 minutes into the second round, just breaks him. His experience, the dog he's got, the power he's got, the range he's got at this weight class at flyweight. He's massive. He's super rangy. He's got power. So Charles Johnson is one of those guys that is just a fraud checker. He is a prospect killer through and through. And I don't think the UFC should give him any more prospects. I think he deserves a jump up in the rankings, give him somebody good, give him a shot at getting into the top 10, which I think he's top 10 right now. I think he's number 10 in the division. He should get a top 5 opponent, if anything, man. He's been putting in the work, and he only lost his only loss in the past 7 fights, I believe, is to juiced up Ramazan Temirov, who was taking PEDs and who was cheating, clearly. So Charles Johnson, one of the best prospect killers. We move on to the next prospect killer, Alexander Hernandez. This is more recently one of my favorite prospect killers. I loved me some Chase Hooper, man, some Chase Gooner Hooper, but Alexander Hernandez put his lights out in the last fight. Big 1-2 down the pipe, dropped Hooper and finished him, brutally finished him as well. Alexander Hernandez is one of those guys who was a massive prospect coming up, and then he got shut down by Donald Cerrone, and now he's had an up and down career, and now he's on a 3-fight win streak. And they're not all against prospects, but Hooper was definitely a prospect, and he shut that shit down. In the first round, finished Chase Hooper as a massive underdog as well. Alexander Hernandez was one of the bigger underdogs on UFC 319. Some of these recent prospect fraud checkings have been like decently recent. Like we've had 319, we had Shanghai, we've got some other ones we're going to get into, but Alexander Hernandez just beat the shit out of Hooper in the first round and finished him with like 2 seconds to go. Finished him in the first round, and Alexander Hernandez is now riding a 3-fight win streak. He's not even that old. I think he's 32, 33. So good win for Hernandez, and he's definitely a prospect killer. I mean, he just shut down Chase Hooper, who a lot of people regarded as the next Charles Oliveira, man. But we're not going to have a next Charles Oliveira. Nobody can be as good as Charles Oliveira. But Chase Hooper was definitely a prospect. He was definitely a prospect. He was on a decent win streak, and he'd been beating a lot of guys, and everybody was thinking, he's going to run through Alexander Hernandez. He's going to sub him. But Hernandez showed him that there's levels, man, and he is a prospect killer for sure. So Alexander Hernandez, one of the next prospect killers. We move on to the next one. Neil freaking Magny. He hasn't done too much prospect killing this year, but he did just beat Dos Santos, and he is fighting Jake Matthews. I expect a potential Neil Magny fraud checking against Jake Matthews in Perth. Is it not predictable? That it gives me Mike Malott versus Neil Magny vibes. Being in the hometown, Mike Malott was in Toronto, I believe. Neil Magny was down 3 rounds, and he needed that finish, and he just dogged it out, and he got the finish. Mike Malott gassed out a little bit. Neil Magny got top position, rained down those shots, and got the win. I could definitely see another scenario where we see a Neil Magny performance, comeback, prospect killing performance against Jake Matthews. I could definitely see it happening. But Neil Magny's one of those dudes who's just done some of the most prospect killing in the UFC. I mean, I can't even count the amount of prospects that he has beat. He's beat so many of them. Unfortunately, he got knocked out by Protez. He got knocked out by Morales. Some prospects will get him, but others he will just be a bit better dog. He will just have more experience, and he will just survive longer until he finishes you. He also did that against Zaleski Dos Santos. Obviously, Dos Santos older, but he showed he still got it. And I think he can do it against Matthews and pull off another prospect killing in the making. I could see it. It's loading September 27th. Neil Magny, 3rd round KO or 3rd round sub or something, like pulls off a Darce choke. I wouldn't even be surprised, man. But Neil Magny, one of the best prospect killers. We move on to the next one. Raoni Barcelos. This was one of my favorites of 2025. One of my favorites by far. UFC 311. One of the first pay-per-views we had of the year. Raoni Barcelos fraud checks the absolute shit out of Peyton Talbot. Just dog walks him for 3 rounds and just beats up on him for 3 rounds. This was a still got it performance. This was a prospect killing performance. A beautiful performance by Raoni Barcelos. Just actually dog walked Peyton Talbot, who was one of the biggest prospects. The biggest prospect at bantamweight at the time, at least, right? He lost 3 rounds, dominantly lost those 3 rounds. And Peyton Talbot didn't have anything for Raoni Barcelos. I think Peyton Talbot was a minus 1,200 favorite. Minus 1,200. And everybody parlayed him. I did not. Thank the Lord I didn't parlay him. But everybody parlayed him. And that was the issue. So Raoni Barcelos pulled off a massive fraud checking. A massive upset, and one of the best prospect killers. I mean, he just beat Cody Garbrandt. Garbrandt's younger than Barcelos. We'll call that a prospect killing. Okay, maybe not a prospect, but we'll call that a killing, And Barcelos can still do this shit, man. A lot of people were counting him out after losing to Umar, getting KO'd by Umar, but that's Umar, man. And he caught him with the perfect shot. But Barcelos is still in there. He could be a ranked bantamweight right now, honestly, and he could compete with the best. So he is one of the better prospect killers. We will move on to my final prospect killer, one who's done it very recently, one of my favorite, Johnny freaking Walker, boys. Johnny Walker gets it done over Zhang Mingyang in China, in Shanghai, finishes him in the 2nd round via leg kick. He dives for a takedown early. Goofy ass takedown. He was pulling he shaved his mustache, called himself Hamzat. He was going in for the takedown immediately. Kind of lost that 1st round, very close back and forth, but dogged it out, survived to the 2nd round where Mingyang hadn't even been in years. He hadn't been in the 2nd round in years. He was tired, he was exhausted, and Johnny Walker beat up his leg and just chinned him with the leg kick. He kicked him, dropped him, finished him on the ground. Beautiful work by Johnny Walker. Fraud, check, prospect, kill. Easy work for Johnny Walker, man. And Johnny Walker is now the guy that beat him early on in his career. I forget the guy's name. Was it a Brunson or a something? It was something like that, where Johnny Walker was on a 4-fight win streak in the UFC, all KOs. He was, hyped up prospect. Oh, he's going to beat John Jones, all this. And then he fights this guy, and that guy knocked him out. And Johnny Walker's just done that to Ming Yang, who has had 4 fights in the UFC, and then fought Johnny Walker as his 5th fight in a main event. And Johnny Walker holds down the fort and kills the prospect. Easy work for Johnny Walker, honestly. Johnny Walker's chin is better than Zhang Mingyang's legs. Zhang Mingyang got twig legs if he's not eating that leg kick. But Johnny Walker gets it done. One of my favorite fraud checkings, prospect killings of the year. We've had so many great prospect killings, and it kind of shows you can't bet on those minus 1,000, between minus 500 to minus 1,000 favorites who are undefeated, or are prospects that are just, they can't be beat by anybody. This is MMA. It's not boxing. It's not boxing at the end of the day. They're not going to get away with scraping by with a decision. Maybe they will, but most of the time they'll get caught. They'll get put out, boys. But that's the entire video, guys. If you guys did enjoy the video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, drop it down in the comments who your favorite prospect of 2025 is, and I will catch you boys in the next one. See you.